Thank you, PILF, for having me here. Thank you, Manjari. It's indeed delightful to be in this Lit Fest with a heart. Delighted to be with Alka Pandey and Shalini Modi here today for a truly scintillating talk on rasas. Rasas, as you know, is the main juice that keeps us going. And there have been so many different contradictory ideas about rasas and it being truly intrinsic to India. The Western world hasn't really comprehended the complete aura of the rasa and has often kind of likened it to the cathartic process, the catharsis of Aristotle's poetics. But catharsis for all of us would be just one little part of the rasa. The overwhelming rasa is truly something that cannot be defined in the Western concept. My first question to Alka would be, Shringar has always been known as the king of rasas, the principal rasa, and it is predominant in most of our scriptures. And it is not about love and languor only. It also explores the erotic in Kumar Sambhava, where Parvati and Shiva, Kalidas is talking about their love and Kartikeya being born. And Shringar has also been described by some as superficial, superfluous. So we would love you to talk about Shringar and the different aspects, the way it can be explored.
Thank you, Shohini. I too would like to actually thank Manjari for so skillfully, thoughtfully curating this festival. And I'm really delighted that she chose this particular theme. And I'm here with these two beautiful women who are exploring rasa in both performance and text. What is really interesting for me, I sit here in the middle. I think it's been placed very strategically. I like it. Because while Shalini is looking at it from the point of view of the sacred spaces, astrology, and through the written word, Sohini is of course doing that as well, but is actually practicing and embodying rasa through dance. I'll just go back a little bit to the Natya Shastra, a text which actually where you see the emergence of the theory of rasa being expounded. Rightly, as Shohini said, rasa is unique to us. It is unique to us in our country because we are a very sensual country. We are quite sculptural in our way. We are very haptic, where the touch is very important to us. And what we see here, I mean, when I was in Berlin at this very avant-garde institute of learning called the Max Planck Institute, they were talking about the theory of emotions and were talking deeply philosophical, and I was there for some lectures. It took me 2 days to understand actually they were only talking about rasa. But the way they were looking at rasa was in a very non-rasa way. You know, they were looking at the theoretical discourses. Theory is very important, no doubt. We are also a hugely philosophical country. We also talk a lot of theory. If you look at our books of knowledge, the Vedas, they are deeply theoretical. But rasa is actually about imbibing. It is about the essence. And when I talk of Shringar, it is the Rasaraj. We have the Navarasas, really. It is like Linda Goodman's signs of your zodiac signs, literally. What we do is, through the rasas, try and deconstruct the human emotions and experiencing them through bhav. So ras and bhav go hand in hand. The other rasas are Bibhasta, Raudra, Veera, Shanta, um, and Shringar being one of them. Since Sohini has asked me only about Shringar, so I will talk about Shringar. Shringar actually means beauty, embellishment. Shringar can also go into the realm of poetry, particularly in pre-modern poetry, in uh, Indian texts, Sanskrit poetry in particular. Shringar was a predominant rasa. And when we talk of Shringar, we also talk of love. And when we talk of love, there are many kinds of love we experience in our lives. There is erotic love, of course, where in the Ritu Samhar you hear Kalidas, talking of the seasons of love. In Kumara Sambhav, you talk of the love of Shiva and Parvati. In the Meghadutam, it's really beautiful, where he's the cloud messenger. And what is the cloud messenger doing? Really conveying feelings of love of a yaksha to his wife, who he has left behind because of a curse. So love has also many meanings. Now that was Shringar of erotic love. There is Vatsalya, love of a mother to her child. But for me, the greatest love of Shringar, which I want to interpret, is self-love. Because in our texts, and particularly in our Adhyatmic journey, when we are in our Adhyatmic journey, it is important to perceive how do we experience Shringar within ourselves. Shringar is not only about the Solha Shringar that we do. That is also part of Shringar, because if you look at the Nayak Nayika Bhed in traditional Indian painting, particularly miniature paintings, particularly in the Ragamalas, particularly in any kind of text that you see from the medieval period, you will see a lot of Shringar where it is also about the Nakshika Varnan, or the beauty of a woman, which is expressed through Shringar. But I would again go back to the aspect of self-love. Because if you love yourself, you're actually loving God. Because what does our philosophy say? That in each of us, in Buddhist thought, Appodipa Bhava, you are the light within. What is that light within? It is the Brahman, or the Lord who lives, or the goddess who lives within you, or the supreme power that lives within you. So if there is self-love of Shringar, it is important to address that Shringar, because if you are addressing the Shringar which is there within you, you are actually experiencing your love to your divinity. And that is very, very important for me in Shringar. That's how.
Absolutely, Alka. Thank you for the answer, because it also creates, I think, self-awareness in all of us. Shalini, my question to you would be, with reference to your book, the two different kinds of Shringar that we have, Vipralambha Shringar and Sambhoga Shringar. How have you explored it in your book in terms of Krishna, Radha? So please tell us something about it.
So namaste to everyone here. And even I'd like to thank the PILF team and Manjari for having me here. So I'll begin without delay about Shringaras. For me, Shringaras, sends me back in time when I was a little kid and I went to Vrindavan with my parents. And I wanted to buy this little Laddu Gopal, or the little baby form of Krishna. And along with it came all these multicolored dresses and jewelry and this colorful shop. And that's when I realized that for Krishna, Bhagwan ka Shringar is very important. So maybe not for Shivji, maybe not for other gods and goddesses, but Krishna, Rukmani ke liye Shringar बहुत important hai. And then it comes down to Krishna and Rukmani's love for each other. So it transcends time because they are Vishnu and Lakshmi incarnate. And that's why in their incarnation as Rukmani and Krishna, they've not even met each other. And it's like distance love. They've just heard about each other and they have this longing to get married to each other. So I've explored that in my book. It's not about, usually Radha and Krishna are used as Shringar Ras, but I've done it a little differently because I felt she was Lakshmi. So, and also because I feel Radha and Krishna are actually Bhagwan and Bhakt. It's more like, a different relationship for me. So that's why.
In fact, Vishnu is the presiding deity of Shringar, and the aura of Shringar is that light green. And Shringar also talks about celebration of nature. Even when there aren't lovers there, when two people are not in love or longing for each other, the sheer beauty of nature with all its animals, with all its flora and fauna, as in Abhigyana Shakuntalam, Kalidas talks about it, even that oneness, that awareness of nature is Shringar.
So I think it's also connected to Vishnu, Bhagwan being the preserver. So, he needs the money and all the paraphernalia that comes with it. So I think that's why, it has to be very grand. Everything has to be.
My next question, Alka, would be, I would like you to talk about Rodram and its presiding color red. And why is Rodram considered a negative emotion? It is kind of, it's the darkness which is bringing light. It is the Tandav which is bringing about quiet and stillness. So Shiva, when he's explored, when you explore the Rodram aspect of Shiva, it is sometimes considered negative, that okay, this is a negative rasa. But humanity is comprised of the negative and positive. It has to have all the shades, all the colors, all the navarasas. So I would love to hear what you have to say about Rodram.
So I would like to say that I think every aspect of life has a different viewpoint, and nowadays we are concentrating so much on mental health issues. Anything which goes wrong, you're immediately packed off to a counselor, which I think is very good. And then the counselor tells you, try and see both sides. There's always another side. And I think even Raudra, there are moments when you need to be angry. You need to show the furious. It's like when I was listening to Amartya Sen, when he did the book, The Idea of Justice, he said, you don't only have to talk of the idea of justice, but you have to appear to be just. So when you talk of Raudra, I come to this other thing, because these days I'm getting more and more attracted to the Bhagavad Gita, because I feel that is the biggest tool for every mental counselor to understand, because it really teaches you that, very special moment of detachment. Because if you are detached, you can calibrate your life very well. Half the reason why we as women fail in our long journey of life to make it to being CEOs, and why the world is being ruled majority by men and it's a boys' club, because they don't fall prey to emotions. What happens to women is we fall prey to emotions. And it's at that point, however powerful we may be, and we are the only ones who can multitask, men cannot. But we fail along the way because we fall prey to our emotions and in a negative way. But going back to Raudram, there is a positivity to Raudram, and I will go back to the art texts. I won't give the example of Shiva in this case. I would like to give the example of Durga and Kali Kali in particular, when she rolls out her tongue for the story of Rakta Bij, if she did not show her fierce and terrifying form and not drink up or the blood which fell onto the floor from Rakta Bij, there would be the great dharma problem and the asura would have won. So Raudra in that way, the Raudra roop of Kali was very, very important. And it was important so that there would be a balance. Going back to Shiva's Raudra roop, I'll take the opposite stance. When Shiva becomes very, very emotional on the death of his wife and starts doing the tandav, then it becomes a negative emotion. So in this case, emotion takes over Shiva and Raudra becomes negative. So Raudra can have both the positive and the negative, which is important. And sometimes, like the old story of that man, suited, booted man, standing at the edge of the road and begging, when a person comes and gives him 100 rupees and says, "Here is 100 rupees, but do tell me why did a man as good as you become so poor and you are begging?" He said, "Because I was the same fool that you were, giving 100 rupees away." So you see, you need to have that balance in your life with both the positive and the negative. So sometimes you have to use the negative forces to bring in that positivity. And I think the Raudra also has, if applied well, can get you rich dividends in life, as long as emotions don't take over.
Absolutely, and it balances life out. Shalini, my next question to be, tell us something about Hasyam, as you've explored it in your book, in the Divine Relationships. Tell us something about Hasyam, mirth, laughter, as it's so necessary in the world today.
Yes, so when I was thinking of who to use for Hasya Ras, like which divine relationship, I felt Krishna and the gopis were ideal, who are usually connected to Shringaras, so which is not wrong. But why Hasya? Because when I was reading the Bhagavatam Puran, I realized that Krishna was actually not just playing pranks on them, or not just, breaking their matki and going away like we've heard, or stealing their clothes, but he was doing every act to teach them a lesson. And it was, usually if we want to teach anyone life lessons, we'll be stern about it, we might be angry, there are different ways of portraying it. I think the last one would be laughter, and that's what he did, which was the beauty of it. He taught them life lessons through funny ways, through ways that would amuse them and amuse the world. For example, in our texts, in our ancient scriptures, it's believed that having bath in the rivers are considered sacred, so you can't have a bath nude in the rivers. You have to be clothed. And that's when these gopis were having a bath in the Yamuna river, and Krishna comes and steals their clothes, because he wants them to realize that it was not a correct act as per dharma. And then there's another instance where he plays the flute one night, Sharad Purnima night, and they all come running. So the funny part is they get so enamored, or so, it's almost like he's a Pied Piper, and they are the mice running. They leave half-done cause. If they've put kajal in their eyes, sometimes they've put kajal only in one eye. They're feeding their husband, they've left them half-fed, and they run for him. And then when they are in his presence, they suddenly get this pride of being, the special one to be with him. And he realizes that. And he says, okay, now they are getting this pride and ego, and I need to teach them a lesson. So he just disappears. And he disappears, and they go crazy. They try to enact him. They go on their fours. They're crawling like a baby Krishna sometimes. And then when they've had their lesson enough, he appears again. And then he's, there's one Krishna for every gopi. So it's like one Paramatma for every Atma. Like you can have your personal Krishna. He's almost kind of depicting that I'll be your personal Krishna. So I think that's why Hasya Ras is very close to my heart, especially in this relationship.
That's absolutely wonderful. Alka, my next question to you would be that when Bharat Muni wrote the Natya Shastra, he put in about 6 to 8 rasas. And Rasa Shantam was missing. That was treated like the stepchild because he said that the Brahma had come to him and told him of the 8 rasas. So Rasa Shantam is when Shiva is in his Tandav stupor, and Parvati quietly hums the Raga Malkos in his ears, and that calms him down, stops the Tandav, and also saves the cosmos, saves creativity. So Raga Shantam, Malkos and Shantam, why was it always ostracized? It's not accepted in the main fold of the rasas. And do tell us something about Rasa Shantam, which is the 9th rasa according to Abhinav Gupta.
So I can tell you about the Shanta Rasa, but I've not done enough, or I do not know enough about why Shanta was ostracized. I'm not really aware of the ostracization, but what I know is that the 8 rasas were kind of canonized by Bharat. The 9th was added by Ananda Gupta. That was done almost about 14 centuries later. It was added because one did not Bharat Muni did not really consider Shanta, or the ultimate rasa of peace and tranquility, to be having the same kind of emotive depth which, say, Adbhuta Rasa had. Having said that, Shanta becomes the final point of a combination of all rasas. For me, it is like the color black. When you mix all the colors of the rainbow, it becomes black. In the same way, when you put all the 8 rasas together and you put them and do like a samudra manthan of the 8 rasas, what emerges is total equanimity, sublime peace, and a complete, I don't know if control is a good word to use, but a complete balance of all 8 emotions. That becomes Shanta for me.
I've always, considered it more of an existential rasa, where you don't need a second person, to long for or to miss or to be angry with. It was always a very modern rasa to me, the way I looked at it.
Also, I think it could be like you've transcended over all the rasas, you've experienced all the emotions, and now you reach the Shant.
Yes, as she said, it's all the colors together in the palette. Shalini, tell us about the story of Ahalya, because for me, as a feminist, I always had my reservations there, somebody being treated like that. But yesterday, your perspective was that it was a lesson in resilience, and those lessons needed to be reached for her to be one with the Paramatma. Do tell us and how you've kind of explored the rasa in it.
So going back to what Alka ji said about Raudra Ras, that it has 2 sides to it. I think everything has 2 sides to it. So it has a positive and a negative. Now, we all know that Gautam Rishi was angered by whatever happened, transpired between Devi Ahilya and Indra. But his anger, he knew where to direct it. So, Valmiki Ramayana, this story has been narrated in many different ways in different Ramayans and in different Puranas as well. As per Valmiki Ramayana, Devi Ahilya was a highly spiritual lady, and she instantly recognized Indra through his disguise. She knew it was Indra. But he was handsome, he was very unlike her unkept husband who was much older, and it was a moment of weakness which she gave into. And she very categorically tells him that, just be wary of how you go out, because if my husband sees it, you've had it and I've had it. And he sneaks out, but Indra being Indra, he's so callous about it. He's happily walking out, very happy with his encounter. And of course, Gautam Rishi sees him. So he does not turn Ahilya into stone as per Valmiki Ramayana. Instead, he tells her to go into respect and to meditate and realize and discover her true self. And he says that once you've reached that epitome, once you've self-realized, is when Paramatma will appear to you. And he doesn't touch her, and that's how she comes alive or anything. It's just his presence itself. And so he actually sent her through a particular path of self-realization. Now, a feminist might disagree with what he did, but for me it is that he sent her on a path of self-realization. Also, in the process of cursing Indra and his wife, he loses all his punya, because anger, even used correctly, does annihilate all your punya karmas, and he had to go back to the Himalayas to build up again. So that's my take on their story.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that? Because I feel very strongly about human weaknesses. So all through the readings that I've done and what I observe, why should a man be excused for his human weaknesses, and why should a woman be castigated for her weakness? So as you rightly said, Shalini, that Ahilya was a very sharp woman.
Very sharp.
And she enjoyed the encounter. Yes, she was disloyal to her husband. I mean, I'm not condoning her at all. And neither would I want to judge her, because maybe she did not have a sexually fulfilled life with her husband. I'm not getting there. My thing is that in my own way, I think she was so smart that when she, one of the things was that when she became quiet and never spoke again, because one of the stories is that, that was her way of retaliation to her husband, showing the fact that you have condemned me into, or trying to run me down. Now I will react in this way. So that was, in her own way, her method of a negative emotion,
Yeah,
revenge.
absolutely.
And I think that that is what I was trying to say about emotions, that if we manage to detach, which is really very, very tough, if her husband had been also evolved enough to forgive, because forgiveness is also a divine act.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It is very, very difficult to forgive. And while I can understand how tough it may have been, because for Gautam Rishi, it was also a direct insult at his manhood.
So I
and
think
his ego.
Yeah. So I absolutely, one was that, but it was also, I think, his conditioning, because he came from a certain space of austerity and a pious lifehood. So it was also his conditioning that life has to be this way.
Yeah, yeah. But I just wanted to say that what I see today, it's still very sad, because in pre-modern times, even when the Kama Sutra was written, it was said that the woman's pleasure should be as much given importance as that of a male. And when in the Mahabharata, the king who lived a life 100 years as a woman and 100 years as a man, I'm forgetting his name, it begins with an S, he said, I would rather be a woman than a man. So, you know, these are things where...
About Ila?
No, not Ila. It's his name begins with an S. He was cursed to be...
Yeah, Shikhandi.
No,
and
not Shikhandi.
Shikhandi.
Shikhandi was the transgender. She was Amba. It'll come back to me. But he lived for... And then when he was asked, what life do you prefer? He said, the life of a woman. because for me the pleasure was much more as a woman than as a man. So these are, our myths and folklores are really examples of helping us understand our emotions. And I really do believe that it's our emotions which define us, the rasas which define us.
Before passing it on to the floor, Shalini, I would like to ask you, how in your book have you explored Bhayanakam?
So, for Bhayanak is actually fear and dull. So, I felt that Kunti and Pandu's relationship hasn't been spoken much about. It's been more usually, when you talk about Mahabharata, it's always Draupadi and the 5 Pandavas. But Kunti had a life, a married life, which had the underlying fear constantly. So when she married Pandu, she had already been a mother, unmarried mother of Karn, and she always lived in this fear of a secret coming out. Then Pandu gets married again, and he marries Madri, who's much younger, who's prettier looking, more bubbly. So she was always scared of favoritism towards her. And then Pandu gets cursed by a rishi, whom he kills in a form of a deer, copulating with his wife. And then there's always this fear that he can die and that they'll remain childless. Because the rishi curses them that if he ever copulates, he will die and the partner will die with him. So these were the various fears that they lived with. But the beauty lies in the strength of her character and how she handled these fears to positivity. She remembered the blessings she had received from the Vasha Rishi, and that's how she could have children through gods. Her husband also wanted these children, and there was prevalent this niyog at that time, which allowed a woman to have children from other men chosen by the family, who were higher than their husband in ranking. And so I feel that all of us go through, I think fear is one of the very, I would say is one of the important kleshas that we all go through. In fact, in Yoga Sutras by Patanjali Rishi, even he mentions Abhinnavesha, fear, as one of the main kleshas. And we all experience fear in many different ways and shades. And so it's not the fear, but it's how you handle it, is what I felt that the divine couples show us. They deal with the same challenges, the same vices, the same desires as us, but the beauty lies in the way they handle themselves. And then comes the Bibhats. So Bibhats is disgust. I felt Ravan and Mandodari were ideal in that respect, because even though she was a pativrata and she followed all the duties of a wife, but she never agreed with his ways. And she would always tell him that. She would always show him the correct path. But of course, Ravan being Ravan, he would never listen to what anyone had to say. His ego was much larger. But the point is that she never agreed, and there was a kind of a disgust, because he would go on a rampage hunting women, whether they were married, unmarried. He would fill his Pushpak Viman with all these women, and you could hear their screams. And so he went on doing what he preferred doing. But so that left her in a kind of a disgust throughout. It was not something that sat well with her.
Thank you. One little question, Alka. Do tell us one anecdote of Adbhutam, because your storytelling in all your books is very beautiful and appeals equally to a 5-year-old child or an adult intellectual. So do tell us a little bit.
Well, for me, the most Adbhut is the image of Ardhanarishwar, the perfect image where horizontally a perfect male and a perfect female are conjoined in one figure. It is one of the most beautiful images in Indian sculpture, and after the Nataraj image, you find it everywhere. So what you experience when you look at this whole image of Ardhanarishwar, it's that of Adbhuta Rasa. Because how can there be two perfectly conjoined male and female figures in one image, so beautifully executed by sculptors, painters, calendar artists, and looking at the balance of the yin, the yang, the purush, the prakriti, the Shiva, the Shakti. So for me, that's a perfect image of Adbhuta Rasa.
Thank you. That's very beautifully put.
Thank you.
And now I would ask any of you, whoever has a question.
Right now the current regime is like kind of anti-love. There is fight for intercaste marriage. If two guys are in love, so why the current kind of trend is that you should not love?
I think it's a cycle. And I also think there's also some reaction happening right now. This is a moment when they say the ending of a Dwapar and the entry into the Kali Yuga. That's how we'd like to think. But I also think it's transition. There are so many things happening and emotions are running high. There is technology coming in. There is a change of human relations. There is a whole change in the breakup of the family systems, the whole system in India. I can talk only of India because I don't want to comment about America, which is a society which I hold responsible exactly for what you are saying. But I think that, this breakup of this beautiful family system that we had, not having our grandmothers tell us the tales, not having our uncles and aunts coming to us for holidays. When I was growing up, our holidays were not going to exotic spaces, me time, my time, body time, meltdown time, slow down time. We didn't do all that. We were with family. And we learned to, there is a word in Hindi called nibhana. We learned tolerance. We learned to embrace the otherness. And we were taught that accept, but always respect. Even though some of our uncles could be wrong or aunts could be mean, because women are always meaner than the males, we were told not to react. And that taught us a lot of fortitude and stoicism, which unfortunately, as parents, we are not in many ways doing our duty. Today, I think the principal of a school in India has the most difficult job, because if she's trying to correct a young child, parents coming from privileged homes will come and complain about the teacher. I was rapped on my knuckles. I was slapped by my mother. I don't think I'm any worse for that. But if I tell my daughter something, don't body shame me. Where she got that from, I have no idea. So these are things which I think we all need to take into consideration. So when you're talking of anti-love, what were we told when we were younger? एक बारी शादी हो गई तो अर्थी आएगी वहाँ से, which was also not that fair. But what were we told? What was the message we were given? Go there, try and negotiate, make a place for yourself. If your in-laws think well of you, we think we brought you well. Today what happens? A girl gets married, empowerment, she misbehaves, you bring her back. And the first thing is you put first 7 years, court mein jao. The boy's family is in prison. So I somehow feel that we are in a process of transition. We need to work things out. And this aggressive feminism which is coming in, and in India we don't need feminism, we need empowerment. There's a big difference. We've always been, we've had women at the top of the pyramid. The Devi is on top. The gods are below. So we need to resolve our own social pressures well. But this phone has ruined everything. With technology, you are looking only at the things from the West without accepting the responsibility which is owed to you. So all the young people today know their rights, but they don't know their duties. And somewhere we are also to blame. So I think this is what I would say, and that is why I think the need for folklore and myth is also the need of society. And I think the more we convey it to the younger people, they're also a wonderful lot of people. They will also, yeah, they're not bad. They are wonderful. They're very loving, but they need to be also
they just
harnessed.
need to be harnessed
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah,
We can't expect
we
to...
need to be
yeah,
strict with them, which
yeah.
we are not.
Yeah, I agree.
We are equally to blame.
Hello, ma'am. I would like to ask a quick question. How would you think rasas evolve, or the sequence of rasas across various different genres like horror, tragedy, comedy, romance, fantasy, or other like sci-fi and stuff? So how would you think rasas, the now rasas, evolve, or the sequence of them?
Yeah. So rasas are emotions, and all of these things that you mentioned, see, nothing can be done without an emotion. Everything has to have. But then you mentioned a few things. What did you really want to know in that?
So the sequence of rasas, like the different patterns, suppose a horror genre has one pattern of rasas, it might be different than tragedy genre.
So horror would of course generate kind of fear in you, right? If you're fearful. If you're not, then it's fine. It can even be comic for some. It could be hasya for some. So it really depends on what you are looking at it from. What is your glass of looking at anything, I think. That matters more than the real, because I think आपने एक उसमें बोला था ना कि when you look at something, AI वाले discussion में you had mentioned that when you look at the murti, or when you look at something, the kind of emotion that is generated in you, that AI can't generate. So similarly, it's the emotion that's generated within you when you see something. Like they say, the beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. So something might generate love in me, but it might not, it might generate disgust in someone. So I feel it's really subjective to how you are feeling at that time.
I'm Shriman. My question to you is to Ms. Alka. So it was a different perspective when you said that why Krishna steal the clothes of why Krishna stole the clothes.
Take the mic a little far.
Hello, can you hear me?
It's blurred. Can you just take it a little
Hello?
far? Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is to Ms. Alka. So it was a different understanding when you explained us as to why Krishna stole the clothes from the river. So similarly now when it comes to rasa, when during the Tulabara, when Rukmani put one tulsi, it almost weighed to the ornaments of it almost weighed to the in the entire gold ornaments that was kept on the other side. So what is your take on it? Is it because of her devotion, or it is because of the love she has for Krishna? Just want to understand your take, because the perspective what you gave on stealing the clothes was very different. So when we were brought up as child, the understanding is the love and devotion is very important. That is why it weighs more than the treasure or the ornaments. So just want to understand your take on it.
So I also go by the traditional take actually, because love and devotion, number one, love and devotion can also be independent of each other. You can be devoted without loving, duty bound without love. So I don't put them in the same breath. I could also be very loving or love deeply, but not be devoted. So
I
for
agree,
me,
yeah.
I don't
Absolutely.
place both in the same. But having said that, I do believe that emotions have no, I mean, they can't be, you can't assign a value in physical and monetary terms to them. Because for me, they are much more than materiality. When you talk of gold and devotion, you know, when you're talking of dhan of the two, I would hold emotions in a much, much higher plane. Because, you know, materiality, it can come and go, and you don't know you can have plenty of it, but with that somehow I really do believe in this in today's world also. जब लक्ष्मी आती है ना बहुत ज़्यादा घर में, it takes away something from you. I truly believe in that. So that is why I feel it's always better to be middle, never too rich. Because with the very rich, and I'm not saying it out of the fact because I'm not rich. No, I'm very content. I do feel when I look around and observe, I feel sadly a huge lacking of emotional wealth with the super rich. In fact, I had a very interesting conversation with Devadatt on that. And when he left, he just told me one thing, बहुत अमीर को छूना नहीं असुर हैं. So I rest my case. That human values, you can't put a value to them. They are above value. So with Rukmani's case, I think what she did was absolutely right for her. Her deep and abiding love and deep and abiding devotion. She had both to Krishna. So that can't be, I wouldn't compare the two.
Just one question, LGBT, about LGBT, because in today it's like India is kind of against two guys in love or two girls in love. But in Indian culture and if you see, it was quite, I mean,
No, but nobody is against today. It's all about inclusion. It's all about inclusion today. I think it was in modernity and with Victorian prudery it became that. In pre-modern society, Tritiya Varga, it was always accepted. You look up any of the older texts, particularly the Kama Sutra, they deal with the third gender, the Tritiya Varga. It was with Victorian. You always look at medieval literature also. You look at our sculptures. You see a lot of same-sex love in the temple facades as well.
Absolutely.
So there is no anti that. It was with modernity and Victorian prudery. Even in the medieval period, क्या कहते थे? Nawabi Shauk, right? So now today it's all about inclusion. So I don't think in India we were non-inclusive. We were always very inclusive. Well, ये तो Western concept है LGBTQ plus and all. Please.
It was very interesting to hear two different perspectives on Ahilya right from the stage. And I have a statement to make on that. What's very interesting is to know that there are so many regional variations to all our folklore. We have, a Ramayana for every region and even within the sub-regions. What's important probably today is to bring those various regional narratives into center stage only, rather in just keeping one in mind. That is one statement that I would like to bring up here. The other is that I have a difference in a point of view to what you had made, ma'am, when you said that women don't rise up to be CEOs because of emotions. I think that's a very binary statement to make because it really doesn't take into account the intersectionality, even patriarchy. Also, I'm a little upset with your comment which says that women are much more weaker, meaner than men. That's kind of again feeding back into the boys' club and in a certain way reinforcing what patriarchy or society at large has constantly been trying to build that narrative against women. So I would like to understand from you.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, and I respect your difference, and I always believe in having differences of opinion. And when I say that, I say it from my own experiences of having lived a life and having worked from the time I was 18 in various stages, various countries, and I definitely feel a woman is always more dangerous than the male. That is for sure.
I agree when you say that's your experience from a platform like this, because so many young people
Yeah.
who can be taking in what you're saying.
Yes. They are free. It's a democratic society, and I take.
It will be great if you can say that you're coming from your personal
Yes, so I will say it again. And if you want me to say that, I'm very happy to say it. I say, whatever I say is my opinion. I take full responsibility for it. And I say it from my own personal experience. Whenever we speak from our personal experiences. So I say that, then I will say that this is what I have experienced, and let the young people take what they have to and discard what they have to. This is an open platform. Yes, of course, and I take full responsibility for it. Absolutely, and I've said it openly and categorically.
I think we have to close now because other sessions are starting. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, adding your perspectives. Thank you, Dr. Alka Pandey. Thank you, Shalini, for your excellent perspectives. And thank you very much for having us here.